This is More to Say with Randy Naughton. Interesting conversations with interesting people. We welcome you into another edition of More to Say with Randy Naughton. Thank you so much for all of your support, following me on social media, all the former TV viewers who are now kind of following what I've been doing for the last couple of years with the More to Say podcast. And I like to say I'm having interesting conversations with interesting people. They could be a sports figure or an author or just pretty much anybody who's got a really cool, amazing story to tell. And our next guest does not disappoint. I want to first off thank all of our sponsors who are part of the More to Say podcast. The Lemp Mansion in St. Louis. When's the last time you've been, right? Amazing meals, incredible fun events, and of course, overnight stays. They are so cool. Go to lempmansion.com and you'll find everything you need to know there. Super, super fun stuff. Team Jakey is a local 501c3 organization. They are a family that lost a loved one to suicide, and they started this called Team Jakey and the Stigma to help kind of try to end the stigma of mental illness and prevent suicides. They put on a ton of great events all over. The Mostly Superheroes podcast with my podcast partner, Logan Janis. He is the man who kind of makes it all go. And of course, our radio partners, the Big 550 KTRS. You can hear More to Say every Sunday at 5 p.m. on the air. Or if you want to catch up on past episodes, go to ktrs.com/podcasts and you'll hear it all. So today we are talking about something that we all kind of saw in the history books. And we all, if you're of the right age, you saw unfold on the news back in the mid 70s. In fact, 50 years ago, 1975, I was 13 years old. And I remember seeing all of this on the news. John Chancellor on NBC. I remember the footage of the Vietnam War and the fall of Saigon. Our guest today is somebody who lived through it, who was there and who is now a successful mom and TV news producer here in the St. Louis area. We would like to welcome Tram Anh Nguyen. She, True Confessions, former TV news producer at Fox 2, where I used to work, and one of the most delightful people on this earth that I know. Tram Anh, welcome into the More to Say podcast.
Thank you. Back at you, love, and you, Randy. Thank you for having me.
I swear to God, you and I have a relationship over the many, many years we worked together where we're goofballs, we goof. I mean, you're an incredible executive producer, TV news producer. That is your vocation. That's what you do. You're one of the smartest people in a newsroom I've ever come across. And I'm not saying that just to butter you up, but at your former TV station here in St. Louis, you helped put together this hour-long special about the fall of Saigon and how your family was directly impacted. And, when sometimes when we were in the newsroom goofing around with Tram Anh, she'd say, "Back off, Naughton, I'm a child of war." And we'd all giggle and laugh about it. But 50 years after the fall of Saigon, you reflect back on the seriousness and the hopelessness and the terror of it all. You were just a baby in 75. What can you tell us at this 50 years later, coming to the U.S. on a boat as one of these refugees, what you and your family endured? Take us through it.
So, as you said, I was just a child at the time. And part of my reasoning for doing this 50th anniversary of the fall of Saigon was to basically not just for me learn my history of my family, but basically learn the history of Vietnamese refugees across the US. We all went through the same thing if we all went in 75 and also during the second wave of boat people during the boat people crisis in 1979. There were two waves. So it's not something that a lot of people would know. And especially as a refugee myself, I was too young to know. So
Yeah.
I kind of had that come to my head probably a year before the 50th, so last year at some point. And I was thinking in my head, what can I do to mark this milestone? Because the fall of Saigon caused such a ripple effect around the world, not just for Vietnamese refugees, but for the countries that took them in. What can I do to mark that occasion, that milestone, pay homage to my people and my family, but also to pay homage to the countries that took us in, particularly here in America. For us here, as green card holders or U.S. citizens. So I did that, and my family, my mom and dad really didn't talk too much about it. Since you watched the special, you know that my father, is a Vietnam veteran.
Yeah.
So he has never spoken of his service. He really hasn't. He was a pilot for the Southern Vietnamese Army and just would never speak of it. It's just that traumatic for him. And my mother would speak about her growing up in Vietnam, but not too much about the times during the war. So I'm like, okay, my mother has passed already. My dad won't talk. What can I do to kind of like learn my history? So I'm like, I want to go ahead and reach out to my aunts and uncles. And they are just like 10, 15 years older than me. So not too much older, but they do remember a lot in that time frame. But I didn't want to go back too far. I wanted to concentrate on the fall of Saigon, what happened leading up to it, what happened after it. And I didn't just want to concentrate on the story of my family. I wanted to talk and tell about the stories of other Vietnamese refugee families here in the St. Louis area. So,
How big of a Vietnamese, I guess, community is there in the St. Louis area? How many would you say? Because I know many Bosnians kind of settled here after the Bosnian War. What about the Vietnamese community? How many are here? Do you know?
when I was doing my history and doing my digging for this project, it was really hard for me to nail down because St. Louis City does not really do a great job of like doing a breakdown. You can see Asians, but you don't see the boil down to
Right.
like particular ethnic groups. So it was really hard. So I really can't say. I do know that we have a strong community Vietnamese here. And as a Vietnamese Catholic, we have a very big Vietnamese Catholic community. And it is basically the backbone of the Vietnamese community there that resides mostly around the South Grand area and South St. Louis.
Right.
So, but yeah, it's a very strong community, even in the smaller numbers, but it's a decent size. I mean, it's not like Chicago, and the biggest, of course, is out in California, in
Hmm.
Houston, in Texas. So,
I'm just noticing in your frame there over your left shoulder, over your shelf full of Emmys. This is how good this lady is at producing TV news. She's so good. And after I watched this special, I mean, it was in a word. I knew you were doing it, and then I watched it, and it was heart wrenching from the very first frame. And you could tell everybody you interviewed in it, and Michelle Lee from Channel 5, um, you could just tell the hurt is still there 50 years later. It's pretty
yeah.
incredible the emotions that still come up. How many people in your family came over in that first wave in 75? Because I know that you have a lot of family pictures, and it is
Hmm.
just filled with lots and lots of people.
Lots of
How many
people.
people came over in that initial wave?
So the initial wave, I would say, I was among them as a grandchild. I think I was the only grandchild among that first wave. So there were 11, 12, 13 of us because my oldest aunt stayed back with her family. They didn't come back. They didn't come over. They actually lived in the Philippines for
Mhm.
a little bit and came over in 78. So there was 13 of us, counting my grandma and grandpa.
That's incredible given what I remember from the news footage and watching it, and literal babies being handed up to choppers that are taken off, and to
Right.
be able to keep you all together and to be able for everyone to come over all at once together. Oh my gosh, what a blessing. I know you said your aunt stayed behind, but what did that mean when you all came here at first? Where did the family land? How was that?
So basically, we ended up in Fort Chaffee. So Fort Chaffee was one of 3 military bases
That's in
where,
Arkansas, right?
right, right, in Fort Chaffee in Arkansas. And at the time, it was a federal base. Now it's Arkansas National Guard. So the feds ended up dispersing Vietnamese refugees to 3 different military bases in the U.S. And Fort Chaffee was the one that took in the most, and there were more than 50,000 Vietnamese refugees at the time that passed through. And my family actually stayed there for 6 months because we were there from like June until the end of December, right before
Hmm.
Christmas. And so we spent a good amount of time there. But with regards to escaping Saigon and Vietnam at the time. My family actually, we are from Vũng Tàu. This is where I was born. And, um, like in the special, the bombings started coming hours after Saigon fell. I mean, we're not that far. We're just 4 hours southeast. And when it started hitting, and this is stuff that I didn't hear. So when you're seeing it in the special and you're hearing it for the first time, like I'm hearing it.
Yeah.
And I and and the reason why it was so raw is because my aunts and uncles never spoke about it. They buried that, for decades. No
Yeah.
one ever really spoke about it. So with this project, it was such a labor of love for me because I had to really fight to see if I can get people to talk. No one wanted to talk. Even
Right.
my members of my family, they were like, ah, and I'm like, oh, please, this is so important. And when I kept driving through the fact that, listen, this isn't just for you, this is for the community, and not just that it's a learning lesson, it's a history lesson, but it could help you heal, could help the rest of the community heal by learning about your experience and just how much you've gone through in that time and how successful you are now.
Yeah.
Just documenting that and seeing that, but being able to talk about, gosh, that was so traumatic what you had to go through. And
Yeah.
gosh, the resilience that our family had to continue on after that. I mean, it's not easy. I couldn't even imagine, a family of 13, building a new life with nothing. I mean, we had nothing. Just
Yeah.
like so many refugee families, we escaped with nothing. And the resilience that we carried with us from Vietnam to here to America, I continue to carry because nothing, as you know, I'm a very strong, hard-headed woman
You
sometimes, but
absolutely are.
but nothing's gonna stop me.
Right.
You can't stop me. And like no matter what life throws at you, you're gonna keep pushing and you're gonna keep pushing forward. And that's something that my parents passed on to me. That's a very Vietnamese thing from my people, and that we continue to hopefully carry in our hearts, in our lives, and hopefully that I can go ahead and pass on to my kids, you know?
Well, let's talk about what happened after Fort Chaffee. You spent
Mhm,
a considerable amount of time there, but then your family eventually made it to St. Louis. How did
mhm.
that happen, and why St. Louis?
So, basically, we were in Fort Chaffee for those 6 months. We ended up getting a sponsor family, from, St. Catherine Labouré off of Sappington in South County, and I learned all this during my research for the special, where they were like, "Oh, yeah, they held an actual vote in the parish." It was Father Bronze who was he was the pastor at the time, and he asked the families, "Hey, you know what? There was a big call out across the U.S., across all denominations and faiths. Please help these refugee families. Who is willing to do that?" And he's like, "Are you all willing to go ahead and open your hearts, your pocketbooks, what have you, to help a Vietnamese refugee family?" And it was anonymous across the board. Everybody in the parish said yes. And the Vietnamese family that they sponsored was my family. It was the Bui family. So it was amazing. And they opened their hearts, and we still keep in touch with the Godard family. They were like the main family. And as you saw in the special,
Right.
they had just as many, almost as many kids as my grandparents did. So it was like a perfect mesh.
That's pretty, and it describes like the first Christmas you had with your,
Yeah.
I guess, adoptive family, for a lack of a better term, and things
Mhm.
that you did not experience back in Vietnam, and the family was astounded at the welcoming of some of these U.S. citizens and these people of faith that you share the same faith with. And
Mhm.
it's seeing that, I'm like, oh, there are good people in this world still, thankfully.
Mhm.
Looking at some of the news headlines and coming from the news, both you and I'm sure can be very jaded looking at some of this stuff these days, especially with what's going on with refugees and immigration and things like
Mhm.
that, which, we're not going to get into the political weeds of that. Hi, everyone. It's Randy Naughton from the More to Say podcast with another sponsor shout out. When is the last time you've been to the Lemp Mansion in St. Louis? Did you know it is one of the most haunted places in all of North America with an incredible history? It's a beautiful building, first of all, and they've got so many events. When's the last time you've been there? They've got boozy bingo, holiday brunches, events like weddings and parties, a scavenger hunt, overnight stays, if you dare, Spirit with the Spirit tours, and their legendary all you can eat family style fried chicken dinners on Sundays. It's amazing. So listen, check it out on their website at lempmansion.com. We thank them for supporting our More to Say podcast, and I'll see you at the Lemp. Hi, everyone. It's Randy Naughton from the More to Say podcast. Thank you very much for supporting our podcast over the tons of episodes we've done so far. Somebody I want to shout out specifically to is an organization called Team Jakey. They are one of the sponsors of the More to Say podcast, and I couldn't be more grateful to be partnering with them. What is Team Jakey? Well, this family, the Zeller family, knows all too well what it's like to lose somebody to suicide. So that happened to them, their beloved Jake. Took his own life. And what they want to do, they've set out on a quest to end the stigma of mental illness. So Team Jakey puts together all these amazing community events year round to help raise the awareness and prevent suicide and end the stigma of mental illness. So we would love it if you followed them on Facebook, Team Jakey and the Stigma. And of course, thank you for supporting the More to Say podcast as well. Team Jakey is one of our partners, and we are so happy to have them on board. Thank you very much, and we'll see you on the podcast.
Hey there, it's Logan Janis from Mostly Superheroes, the podcast. Whenever you're done with this episode, be sure to go check out our show at mostlysuperheroes.com or by searching Mostly Superheroes podcast on Google, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pandora, iHeartRadio, wherever you get your shows, really. But mostlysuperheroes.com is where you want to be. Check out our event calendar, our past episodes like reviews of Superman, Fantastic Four, and be sure to listen to the recent episode of More to Say with Randy Naughton, where Randy interviewed me, Logan, on her show, and was even featured on the Big 550 AM KTRS. Randy came on our show a while back. You can still go check that out at mostlysuperheroes.com. From Logan, Arena Andy, Scotty Scoop, Sam the Sleeper, and the Mostly Superhero Squad. Thanks for tuning in to More to Say with Randy Naughton, and check out Mostly Superheroes when you're done. Enjoy the rest of this episode, and take it easy.
Rise energy strips. And you're like, Rise? I've seen those. I've heard of those. RIIZE, and the chief medical officer with Rise Health Strips, with the energy strips. And this is Dr. Joe Molesky. And you're like, I know that guy, and he's going to tell us all about it.
Thanks for having me, Randy. Really, what Rise is, or riseup.com, we are a supplement company, but we're different because we provide a different method of delivery. And that method of delivery is a strip. So I'm sure you guys heard of like the Listerine strip or the breast strips, that we put other vitamins and nutrients inside there, like B12, energy. We make it reasonably priced compared to some of the pill versions, or just figure out how much Starbucks coffee or an energy drink costs. I mean, those are $5-6 a piece. So we make it reasonable, we make it convenient, we make it for you.
It is RIIZE, riseup.com, if you want to get in on this latest craze in supplement delivery system. It's under the tongue. It dissolves in moments, works in minutes. So you want to maybe check that out to see which one might work for you, for whatever you'd like to help or correct. Dr. Joe Molesky, I thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Rise up.
When you think about a family of 13 moving to an entirely different country, B, going to yet another city, literally starting from scratch, no money, no place to live, didn't know the language. How did the family kind of sustain itself?
So I didn't have time to kind of like say this in the special because it was just way too long. But my
The
mother,
producer cut it short. That's what producers do.
it's just like, oh man, there's so much good stuff here, but I really got to turn it back. So, my mother was actually the translator for the family because she had actually interacted. My grandma, I'm not quite sure what kind of business. I think they had like a dessert business or what have you, over in Vung Tau. And they actually interacted with the American GI. So my mother actually knew some English. So they used her as the translator. She was the translator for the family. So when they came to Fort Chaffee, she was the point person. When St. Catherine Library reached out to our
Right.
family, it was my mother who was, so my mother played a major role in helping bridge that gap for the family. Now, when it came to getting jobs and all that, St. Catherine Labouré had this family that actually owned a greenhouse, and they offered my grandpa, who was a carpenter by trade in Vietnam, offered him a job. So he had worked there until his passing. He was a greenhouse. He was a horticulturist, and loved what he did and worked there for decades. My mother, with her entrepreneurship, she ended up opening a small chop suey over on the east side, so over in East St. Louis. And that opportunity came about after we came to St. Louis and we got in touch with a local businessman who was Chinese, and he took us in and kind of like taught my mom and my grandma the ropes of how to cook and how to do that. Just a wonderful man, and ended up selling his small chop suey place over in East St. Louis to my family. So that's how they were able to make a living. And then my mom got even um, more ambitious and decided to open a restaurant over in South County, which is where I worked
Right.
growing up, which was the Golden Dragon. You guys probably heard about it on and off as when I worked over at Fox, off a Telegraph, and I worked and helped run that place from the time I was like 10 up. So, I, I, but it taught me so many good things when it comes to responsibility and hard work. And it helped me appreciate just how much my family was willing to go through to help make sure that there was food on the table, that we had the opportunities to go ahead and learn at school, um, you know, and I valued work ethic and what it took to make money, put myself through college, did all that stuff, and did what I could to go ahead and repay my parents when I was able to and was stable enough with my cash flow. But we had such a good um, community here in St. Louis that welcomed us, and it went beyond St. Catherine Labouré. So the St. Louis community is a very generous community and full of love, and you see that in spots like you do in little places that you do today, like right after the recent tornado, people coming together
Yeah.
and lifting each other up. And that is what St. Louis is about, and that's those stories are what touch me, and I'm sure they touch you. And that's why you do your More to Say podcast, is interesting people, but also interesting stories. And that's part of that story that you like to talk about
That's
and say.
100% true. And that's, I often tell people is that they say, why are you doing this podcast? I'm like, well, as much as I loved my 40-year television career, 30 of it at Fox 2,
Hmm.
you do an interview on TV and you'd have 3 minutes and then you
Right,
couldn't get to the meat and potatoes. You couldn't
right,
peel back the onion of the entire story, which is why
right,
we're here today, trying to talk
right.
more about that. And you mentioned a little while ago that you talk about your children. You have 3 children and
Yes.
they were all born here,
Hmm.
and they are of Vietnamese American descent. How are you trying to pass along the history to your children? How are you and your husband as a family trying to instill in them, I guess, the plight of your family, what you went through and how it shaped you as a person and your family today?
So what I do is I really try to make sure that my kids know about their family history. I've talked to my daughters since they were very young about mommy being a refugee, how you got to do stuff, hard work. No one's going to hand stuff to you.
Right.
Never expect that. You always have to work and earn it. And I tried to do the same thing with my son. He's a little bit more different than a girl. I realized that. I was like, boy, I don't know
How
about you
old is he
sometimes.
now? How old is your son?
He's 9 going on
Get
10.
out of here.
I
Come
know.
on.
Remember when you
Stop
held
that.
him when he was a baby?
Yes, I do.
I have that picture. I'm so sorry. I have that picture of you and him on the set. So cute. And I actually, that's like your little saver that I have for your phone number.
No kidding. Okay.
The picture of you holding Jameson.
We need to put that up on the
Yes.
screen. I'll
Okay.
make sure that we get that photo and
Okay.
Logan puts it up.
Okay.
Because I remember when he was just a teeny weeny little baby.
Yes.
Amazing. So I mean, in today's political climate where we again hear so much about refugees and immigrants and green cards and legal versus illegal. And again, I never, ever, ever get political, and I'm not going to hear. How do you shield your children from that? When they do come from immigrant roots, as do we all.
So I had that tough conversation with my youngest daughter because she was getting really triggered with all the images and all the stories.
Right.
And I always try to tell her, listen, you need to make sure that you are informed on all sides. All news the articles that you read may not be down the middle, and you got to be down the middle. And I'm like, your mother, as a journalist, I've always been right down the middle.
Yeah.
You go ahead and you read the facts. You read this is what this. All the other things you need to kind of like set to the wayside. So if you're going to read it from one article from one entity, you need to make sure you're reading it from the other entity.
Gee, what sound advice? I mean,
right.
people don't do that today.
Yeah,
they just don't.
And that's why I said, I'm like, just make sure you are so informed about both sides of the issue. And then if you still feel strongly about it, and I actually did this, I texted her the websites for our senators and our Congress people. And I said, this is why they're in power. This is why we vote them in, or you don't vote them in, whatever, but they represent your community. So if you feel strongly about how people are being treated a certain way or something like that, you write them. I said, you have the power of the pen, the email, what have you, and you write them. And I said, never underestimate how much of a difference you can make with just one stroke of a pen or one type. And I always try to make sure my kids know that they can make a difference, that they can go ahead and push through and ignore the noise. You got to ignore the noise. There's so much noise out there. And I'm like, no matter what, know that you are who you are. You have this heritage and this background and this culture that you should so be proud of, and know that we wouldn't be here without and all these opportunities that were given to my family, but that the American people. It is a different environment now, but that is where we came from. And I always tell them, just try to be as informed as possible. And if you feel a certain way, take action.
Yeah, take action. Well,
Yeah.
you mentioned about how, people being informed in things, and me looking back on the footage of John Chancellor and the fall of Saigon and the choppers and the people in the street with guns and families fleeing. I'm like, this brought back such vivid memories for me, because I don't know why, and I don't know how I ended up being a journalist and a news person. I was watching this news coverage as a 12-year-old, it drew me to it. And it's like, it doesn't feel like, and I know it's 50 years, and I know, we talk about, oh, that was a long time ago, but it was really kind of just yesterday. Do you find that today's youth, young people today, don't see what happened, don't understand what happened, don't realize the gravity of what happened on both sides?
And that's one thing. And I can't speak to the rest of the youth. I can only speak to my family.
Right.
And when it comes to that, I always try to make sure the kids understand this is your family roots. This is your family history. This is what happened on this side. This is what happened on this side. And I hold no animosity against Vietnam as it is today with, it's run by communists. I hold no animosity because as a youth, I also took a class in the Vietnam War to learn more about it in college and all that. So I learned the history of Ho Chi Minh and what he did leading up to that and how he embraced communism because he was not being listened to when he did reach out to the U.S. government after World War II and all that. So I know, and I told him like the Communist Party and the ideologies of that he used as a vehicle to go ahead and reunite the country. I don't agree with how it all went about, but
Right.
I know that was what it was. And I told the kids, no matter your political ideologies, just learn to respect each other. Learn to respect each other and learn to respect that point of view. Your point of view is just as valid as their point of view. You know, where I
Yeah.
draw the line is when it gets racist and it gets really that is where I draw the line because
Right.
I have no qualms about busting someone down for that.
I know. I've seen you in action. Absolutely. Well, we all know that right after the war ended, right after the fall of Saigon and American troops came home, they were not welcomed. They were not praised. They were not revered. They were not seen as heroes. They were, terrible names. And that's probably why so many American US troops kept it to themselves. I mean, obviously, it was very traumatic, and I've seen and heard many, many, many different stories, some of which are told in this particular special that you put together. But now, when I see a Vietnam veteran, or any veteran for that matter, it's like, hell yeah, thank you for your service. The more
Right.
I learn, even though I was just a kid at the
Mhm.
time, the more I learn. And it's like, are you finding that that particular climate has changed where people are like, okay, we get it now, and
I
they are to be revered?
I definitely do. And I wanted to do my part in this special to make sure it was all encompassing. That's why I wanted the stories from Vietnamese refugees and the sponsor families, but not just stop there because again, it was fought on both sides and I wanted to touch on the story of veterans. And this was the first, as you know, war that was televised. So
Right.
it was beaming into everyone's rooms. It was their first time they'd ever seen it. And it was very traumatic for them. And
Yeah.
to see how the tide quickly changed, that's how public opinion changed. But these guys and gals out there on the front lines, they had nothing to do with that. They were either drafted or what have you, but they were doing their job. They were doing what they had to do. And when they came home to that public opinion and all that, and being called what they were called, some pretty horrible names, it
Yeah.
was traumatic for them. So they ended up burying it. But I think with time and how we've been, I would say, even in the last, maybe 3 decades or so, when we started to reach back out to them and say, hey, you know what, let's make sure that we hear their stories and hear why they buried it and hear what they went through so that they can have healing. That just helps us move forward. Like I said, when it comes to my own history, learning about history, this is like the Vietnam War and the fall of Saigon is Vietnam history and American history. It's both.
Absolutely. I
So,
100% agree.
so that's why I'm like, make sure we hear from those poor veterans who are out there on the front lines because they deal with a lot of trauma and I can't even imagine the
Even to this
trauma and the
day,
guilt.
50
Yeah,
years. Yeah. 50
right.
years.
And I just wanted to make sure that we can hear that. So hopefully, we as journalists can go ahead and do our part to continue the conversation out there in the community and to continue to inform. And, everything's kind of shifting these days from, our traditional medias to digital and what have
Right.
you. You're on podcasts. So whatever we can do, like you're doing now, to inform the youth, hopefully, and whoever who wants to listen, hopefully we can do that. That's our part as journalists. That's
Well,
how I took it.
yeah, you're an incredible storyteller, and we are going to be running out of time, but I did want to touch base on this. This past June, you went back to Fort Chaffee
Yes.
in Arkansas, and for a reunion of many of the people who stayed there for that time before they kind of dispersed to their cities. What was
Mhm.
that like?
Oh my gosh, it was amazing. So, and that all came about because of the special I'd done. And the woman who was in charge of the Chaffee Crossing Historic Chaffee District, she runs a museum down there that has a really small but powerful exhibit that touches on the Vietnamese refugee experience there. And she wanted to do more. She wanted to raise more money to kind of expand that. And then she asked me, "Oh my God, Tremont, we want to do this on World Refugee Day. Would you be an MC?" I'm like, "Are you sure about that?" I don't know. You
Oh
know me
no,
with
you're a commanding presence.
but my mouth, you know how it is. So I was just like, okay. I said, sure, sure. Oh, I would. And it was amazing because I was there with Nam Lac, who is very famous in the Vietnamese community. He is a songwriter and singer, poet, and I went with him. So I'm dealing with a veteran, who's been out there in the media and entertainment biz, and he was great because he's like my dad's age. I told my dad's like, "Oh yeah, I know him." I said, "Dad, I'm gonna MC with him." I'm like, I remember watching him in, like, if you were Vietnamese ages ago, they used to do like these big, um, kind of like, I wouldn't say like Solid Gold type of thing, but it was like these big
Like a
shows.
variety show, like an Ed
Variety show.
Sullivan. Yeah.
Yes, 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 yes. And it was like Paris by Night or Asia. So he used to be the MCs for all that. So I grew up watching this guy. So now I'm MCing with him. It was hilarious.
Full
So it
circle
was,
moment. Wow.
yes, it was amazing. And then I got to meet Dat Nguyen, who former Cowboy, first Vietnamese NFL player. He was amazing. He was hilarious. And just meeting all of these families from across the US, and who all decided this was a big enough event to come, and just the community, the camaraderie, the laughs, the love that we all shared, just hearing their success stories and how they broke barriers. It was amazing. It meant so much to me. And it was great for them to say, wow, somebody actually thinks this is important enough to go ahead and mark with us. And they were honored. I was honored. So it was a great experience.
That's amazing. Well, you, like I said, are an amazing storyteller. I love you like a sister. I've known you for so many years. We've worked together in the trenches in the middle of the night when everybody's crabby. And she mentioned her mouth, and she's not kidding. She and I both are known for our salty language at times, which we've kept it nice and PG this time, Tremont, which I'm happy to
Yes, yes.
say.
Thank you.
So I want to thank you so much for sharing your time and your stories and your heritage and your amazing family story. You guys, I mean, goosebumps, really. Your story is amazing. And you know what? You said it when you said you're resilient and you're a fighter. And I have a feeling you're not done yet.
No, thank you so much for this opportunity, Randy. Much love to you, girl.
Much love to you. And I'd like to thank you all for joining us as well. Hopefully you learned something. And if you're now curious, look it up. Read about the history of the 50 years since the fall of Saigon. It's one of the most important chapters in American history where real amazing lives were affected. And now many are very successful here in the U.S. and in St. Louis. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the More to Say podcast, the Lemp Mansion in St. Louis. Go eat, go stay, go have fun, you name it, lempmansion.com. We'd like to thank Team Jakey. They are a 501c3 nonprofit that started up after they lost a loved one to suicide. So they want to end the stigma of mental illness. The Mostly Superheroes podcast with my podcast partner, Logan Janis. I could not put any of this business together without Logan. Thank you. Thank you. And of course, our podcast partner also at KTRS Radio. You can hear the More to Say podcast every Sunday at 5 p.m. on the Big 550 KTRS. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll see you next time.
This has been More to Say with Randy Naughton. Interesting conversations with interesting people. Be sure to like or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.